Today is Tuesday, March the 10th, 2015. The time is 10 a.m. It's my pleasure. Call the order of the State of Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. Ms. Lisa Mosley, will you please call the roll?
Mark Cochran.
Here.
Robert Helms.
Here.
David Neal.
Here.
W.T. Patterson.
Here.
Jane Gray Sowell.
Here.
Robert Starkey.
Here.
Anita Taylor.
Here.
Mr. President, all members are here and accounted for.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. We have a quorum. We will continue meeting as planned. We will now adopt the agenda. If you will now take a look.
Move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Have a move from Ms. Sowell and a second from David. Okay. Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda is adopted. The commissioners are coming down, so we'll kind of skip down to administrative matters until they get here.
Mr. President, before they come, you will have, regarding your financial recap, the information that was emailed to you, but on the first page, they may not go over that part. They will probably be going over pages 2 and 3, which are the details, the high fruit, so to speak, is out there on the front page that just brings out the main points, and the second and third page are details. So I'm going to leave that part till they get here, and I'll cover whatever they don't cover. And when they're here, if you have any questions for them pertaining to the financial matters or any other matter, that's a good opportunity for you to ask. I'm sure they'll be willing to take questions. As far as my administrative report, moving to the licensee report, you have a report of licenses that were administratively approved by the executive director pursuant to the board's authority for the period of February 10 through March 9, 2015. And you can see the list of establishments and then those individuals. Closed establishment report, we have 2 establishments that reported closing since the last board meeting. That's Rest Haven Funeral Home and Cremation Services at 2930 Highway 41 South in Clarksville, and Tri-Cities Funeral Home, LLC, 2630 Highway 75 in Blountville. Now, there is a new establishment that's opened in that same location. It's East Tennessee Funeral and Cremation Services. Disciplinary action report for this meeting. We have 2 consent orders that were administratively accepted and approved by the executive director pursuant to the board's authority for the period of February 1 through February 28, 2015. Open complaints, we have 50 open complaints at this time. 12 of them are against funeral directors and embalmers and 38 against establishments. And Mr. President, other than the budget report, that would be my report to the board today. We'll look at that first page while we await their arrival. The first page there basically says that the beginning balance for the Board of Funeral Directors July 1st, 2013 was $714,380. In income or net revenue earnings, we had $932,587, which makes total funds available $1,646,967. The expenditures for July 1, 2013 through June 30th, 2014 was $407,917. The cost backs, these are allocations charged back to the board from administration and legal, $151,424, which makes the total expenditures including cost backs $559,341, which left a reserve balance for the board of $1,087,626. Less core expense. Now, core is a new computer system that the state is setting up, and the board pays a pro rata share compared to the other boards and users here at the department. And why that was broken out separately, I'm not sure, but that's the way the finance people chose to do it. I guess they wanted to track what our expenses were for that. So the core expense to the board for this period was $21,300, which makes a reserve balance after the core expense of $1,066,326. Of course, you're aware that we being the board, not me, but the board reduced the licensing fees, the renewal fees, and I'd suggest monitoring this for a while longer and, might be able to reduce some other fee or reduce that license renewal fee greater. Of course, this was a good year. The even numbered years are the best years. The odd number years, we have a loss of usually around $100,000. Now that just means $100,000 taken away from the reserve. That doesn't mean that we're running in the red or anything like that. But because most of our license for establishments and funeral directors renew on June the 30th of the even numbered years, that's when most of our income is. So that's the even numbered years are good years. The odd numbered years are not so good. But when you look at everything overall, then it is a good balance. Of course, we always run the risk of maybe some money being taken away from the board and put into the general fund. That has happened historically. Yes.
That was going to be my question. Is this pretty much ours, or is it
That's a question.
up in the air?
That's a question that the deputy commissioner and assistant commissioner would probably answer better for you. But I do know that historically, money's been taken.
They are and hadn't tapped it.
So it hasn't been done during this administration. There hasn't been any money taken from the board during this administration that I can remember or aware of. But
Weren't in the old days, didn't that, I know the license were due June 1st, but they didn't send out till after July for renewal because any money there June 1st went into the general fund. This was years ago. So they waited, so you were always renewing your license late, but so the money would be on the opposite side of the June 30th or 31st.
what happened, what we don't ever want to get into is a negative position for a 2-year period, because then that causes you to come up before the Government Operations Committee and regarding sunset. So that's something we never. When I came to the board, the board had a deficit of almost $1 million, and by far this is the greatest reserve that we've had during the period that I've been here. And I want us to have a reserve so that if we have a bad economy like we recently experienced, then we have sufficient money to pay our bills. But at the same time, we don't need to build up a great reserve. We need to, because this money is all money that licensees have paid or applicants have paid. There's no state money involved in this. It's all money that's been paid by licensees or applicants.
When someone is found in violation of the rules, where does that money go?
That money
If
comes
and
back
when
to-
they pay it?
That comes back to the board. That's
That-
included.
That's included in this?
That's included in this money here. It is, and a matter of fact, you will see.
Breakdown on that?
I'm not sure it's on your copy. I have seen it on my copy, and I was thinking it was on your copy. Just let me take a minute and see if I can. Yes. It's about 3 or 4 on the second page, about 3 or 4 items, 5 or 6 items from the bottom. It was $43,100 for the fiscal year 13 through 14. So this present fiscal year, it was $43,100. The previous fiscal year, it was $55,242. So that's being tracked now and kept separately. So that's, and then right below that, you'll see a state regulatory fee. That's a fee that we pay to the Finance and Administration, Department of Finance and Administration. It's based on the number of licensees that we have. And that's what the subtraction is for that. But I'll be glad to answer any questions. If you don't have any questions, Mr. President, that concludes my report to the board today.
Do we want to go on while you're there and do the legislative update while we're waiting?
Okay.
Do we have time for that?
Could we get a motion on the
Yeah.
on the report?
Motion.
Have a motion for Mr. Neal, a second. Patterson, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We want to do the legislative update now.
I'll be glad to do that. Ms. Richardson may want to be involved in that as well.
I see she's in there also. So.
This is the update that we have as of yesterday. The bills are listed there. Some of these bills do not directly affect the board, but it affects funeral directors, so we assume that you'd be interested in them. Got Senate Bill 0194, which is the companion bill is House Bill 0163. That's one that we talked about last month. Has to do with the composition of the board. Senate Bill 0320, companion bills House Bill 0289, has to do with the medical examiners, and we talked at length about that last month. House Bill 0199, the companion bill Senate Bill 0621, that defines funeral merchandise, and it's my understanding that the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association is working with the Cemetery Association of Tennessee, and there may be an amendment to that bill, but that bill is working through. House Bill 0446, which is companion bill is Senate Bill 0870, has to do with cemeteries. It's a, for lack of a better word, a compilation bill that they're presenting. I'm sorry, that's not their compilation bill. That is a bill that if an amendment doesn't get worked out to House Bill 0199 that the Cemetery Association may sponsor, or may, they're the group that's behind the bill, I guess is what I want to say. And then the last is Senate Bill 1235, and the House bill to that is 1307. And that's the compilation bill for the Cemetery Association is the group that's behind that bill as well. Those are the bill numbers that we're aware of. There's a website there that you can go to and look at more details if you're interested in that, or you can search. Of course, the time to introduce bills is past for this session, but there could be amendments to any of the bills which can rewrite the whole bill.
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Richardson? Okay. Right. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Have a motion from Mr. Cochran.
Second.
Second from Mr. Helms. All in favor? Thank you. Do we want to go on and do the minutes next? Okay. Asked everybody to review your minutes from the February 10th board meeting.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion for Mr. Helms and a second from Ms. Sal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
President, could we move to the individual licensees? Would that be acceptable?
Acceptable, yes, sir.
First one, I do not think he's present. Joseph Scott Gallion. I do not believe he's present today. Mr. Gallion's applying to the board by reciprocity. He applying for a funeral director and an embalmer's license. He has been previously licensed, or he's currently licensed in Georgia, and has been previously licensed in Virginia. I'm not sure if that registration is still current or not. He has way more than 5 years, but again, because the statute we have regarding that, it's one that I bring to you for you to look at. I recommend approval of both licenses regarding Mr. Gallion. And he lives in Knoxville, and I told him if he was concerned about his work schedule, and I told him if he wasn't able to be here that we would present it to the board.
move to accept.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Sal, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. License is issued.
And the next one is Miss Lolita Louise Shaw. Miss Shaw is present, if you'd like to come up. She is applying for a funeral director's license. I recommend approval of her license. Back at the time she took the national board, they would take your scores and average them and decide whether or not you passed or failed. But she, as you'll see in your notes there, you can see her national board score on her arts. She passed that. She made more than 75, and she's passed the laws and rules test. It's been a period of time, but I recommend approval of her license as a funeral director as well.
Motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Mr. Patterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Your permission, we'll move on to the establishment application. We have some representatives present from Alternative Cremation and Funeral Service to be located at 206B Cool Springs Boulevard, Suite 201 in Franklin, Tennessee. This is a new establishment. Its ownership is a limited liability company, and the owner is Brick Church Funeral Home and Cremation Services, LLC, 2422 Brick Church Pike, Nashville. I have two representatives present. They can identify themselves and make whatever comments they want to the board.
Janet Montgomery.
Do you want you're Miss Montgomery, want to tell the board a little bit about what your plans are?
Bobby's got laryngitis this morning,
Okay.
so he's going to let me take over. We hope to open today an alternative funeral service in Williamson County. We like that area a whole lot. We feel that, an alternative would be very well accepted. All of our body preparations and all will be done on Brick Church Pike at Highland Hills Funeral Home. So that we're just excited about it and would love to have our establishment license.
Brick Church Funeral Home and Cremation Services separate from Highland Hills Funeral Home and Cremation?
No, that's the same.
Two same
it's the
locations.
Same location. It's the same LLC.
Okay.
There's only one establishment. The establishment's Highland Hills. Brick Church is the LLC that owns it, and it does business at Highland Hills. They're not two establishments operating from the same location. It's just the LLC that owns the establishment.
Gribble, has everything been found in order for this?
Yes, sir. As far as I know, everything is in order for the application.
Separate location.
Yes. This is a new location. It's a new establishment, a new business operating. What it would be if it would be Brick Church Funeral Home and Cremation Services, which is LLC, would own Highland Hills Funeral Home and then also Alternative Cremation and Funeral Service. So we'd have two separate locations, but they'd both be owned by the same LLC.
This is the location.
Yes. I like buildings. It's right across the street from NHC.
Services not available through Highland Hills Funeral Home.
The services are available through Highland Hills Funeral Home. We don't have the same prices because we don't have the overhead. North, Highland Hills is north of Nashville. It's going north. We're south now. Well, we're in Williamson County in Franklin, so it's quite a distance from Highland Hills.
You'll have your services in churches and other venues. Okay. Thing being found in order, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor, second from Mr. Patterson. All in favor? Aye.
No.
Or Ms. Sal is voting no. Anyone else voted no, and Ms. Sal the only one.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Mr. President, if we could, what about the request for the continuing education exemption by the licensee? Can we cover that? Have some information there. And of course, we have to be very careful as to what we talk about because of the HIPAA violations. So I'm not going to give you a name. I'm going to tell you that this is a male individual who is 51 years old. He was licensed in 2001. His license expires April the 30th of this year. He has a funeral director and embalmer's license. He called me a few days ago, and he's very concerned about keeping his license. He's in a financial predicament because of what's happened to him health-wise. And of course, he understands that the board cannot waive any renewal fees or anything like that. But the board does have the authority to exempt him from education, continuing education. His speech is he has trouble keeping concentration, and you have the doctor's letter there that gives you some details about his condition. The doctor says that he's going to be that way for a period of time, and as you know, we don't bring many requests to you. As a matter of fact, I think this is only the second we brought to you, to the board in 8 or 9. My suggestion or for you to consider is exempt him permanently unless and until he's employed again by a funeral home. I would ask you just to exempt him permanently, but I tell you what happened on one we did that. He later came back and started working. So I think if he's working, he needs to have his continuing education like all the other licensees. But my suggestion to you for consideration would be that the board exempt him from his continuing education requirements unless and until he returns to work as a funeral director and/or embalmer. And Ms. Richardson may have some legal things she wants to say about that, or she might want it worded a different way, but that's basically the gist of what I'm recommending to you.
I have really nothing to add. You have the authority to exempt him if you feel it's appropriate.
I was looking for this. Wow. Not being able to he didn't do that, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Because he is not capable of doing the continuing education, or is it strictly a matter of finances that he can't afford to do that?
Well, I would suggest you read the doctor's letter, and it would be my opinion it's probably a
I'm trying
combination.
to. Is it just this one thing?
Yes.
All right.
It would be my opinion it's probably a combination of both. You know, there's some problems with him concentrating and doing the continuing education of that many hours, and then also it's an added financial burden to him as well.
He's not presently working.
No, he is not presently working, and he's not able to work. He, as I stated, he was first licensed in April of 2001, and he's met all of his continuing education requirements that he was required to do up until this point.
Move to accept the recommendations of Executive Director.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Seal, second from Mr. Cochran. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
I feel like that they will be here just any time, and I know if we get into the legal report, that may get.
Right, it's a little long, so I was hesitant to start it if I'm going to be interrupted, but
What about
we
a
can.
5-minute recess or something like that? Recess until they get here. Is that okay?
We'll have a 5-minute recess now. We'll now call the board back in session after our break. Next on the agenda will be the budget presentation by Deputy Commissioner Bill Ganty.
Close enough.
Close.
Chairman, thank you, yeah. Good morning.
And Brian
Glad
McCormick. Okay.
Glad you all made it here safely this morning and dry. As you said, I've got the new Assistant Commissioner for Regulatory Boards with me, Mr. Brian McCormack. Some of you guys may know Brian. He was the Director of Boards and Commissions over at the Governor's office prior to coming over here about 6 weeks ago, maybe. Is that right? So we're excited to have him, and we're trying to get him trained. So he's picking up a little bit as we go. And I've also got with us our accounting manager, Bill Huddleston, who's back here, who helped prepare the document that you've got before you, which I hope you do have before you. Has everybody got a copy of the fiscal report? Okay, good. I'm going to go through this. I think this is the second year we've done this, where we've come before. We're doing it for every board and commission to come before you and give you an opportunity to look at your report, ask questions about what we're doing with your money. It's an opportunity for us to give kudos to your great staff, and then to hear your advice and input, anything you might have. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. If you have any questions, certainly stop me, or we can wait till the end, whatever's best for you. If you'll notice in the far right-hand corner, you've got FY 13-14. That's going to be the column we're going to focus on. If you've got to top, you've got regular salaries and wages of $176,936, which is right in line with your previous year. Then drop down, total payroll expenditures of $300,181. You guys had $42,620 in travel. That is your board member travel, primarily to and from the commission meetings. You have got, and I'm going to drop all the way down now to grand total of other expenditures, and $107,736, and then the grand total is $407,917. You'll notice beneath that, your cost backs, administrative cost backs were $91,336. Your legal costs, which we have begun pulling out, as you noticed last year, so you can see how much you're paying for your legal representation. The fine services of Ellery over there of $60,089, and that's cheap for somebody as good as Ellery. So, total expenditures of $559,341. You had $916,737 in licensing revenue, $43,100 in case and complaint revenue. Your net revenue was $932,587, leaving your fiscal year balance at $373,246. Added to your prior fiscal year reserve of $714,380, your reserve balance is $1,087,626. We talked about last year the purchasing of a new licensing system for the division, and actually for the department, and that is the core licensing system. And you'll notice there where it says core expense of $21,300, we were actually able to take that money out of your reserve balance rather than taking it out of your annual operating income, and that accounts for about 75% of your core expense. So you'll see the additional 25% spread out over the next 2 years. And your reserve balance after the core expense is $1,066,326. With that, I will open up the floor to questions, Mr. Chairman.
Our concern, if I may ask, of course, we had discussed this a little earlier. This money, this $1,066,326 belongs to the board. It's been generated by the board.
Yes, ma'am.
The revenue.
Yes, ma'am.
How long will this be kept in reserve before somebody can dip in our till? Can the state come in and get some of this?
They certainly can.
Rob from Peter to pay Paul is what I'm saying.
Yes. It is provided for in state law and lean economic times that they can come in and access reserve balances across state government. So it's not unique to this board. It's all
How long
reserve
would you
balances.
project would it be before the possibility of that would happen? Mr. Grubble has explained to us how we have alternating good years, so to speak, and not bad years, but about every other year we have greater
Yes, ma'am. You have
revenue
right.
in an even year than we do in an odd numbered year.
Yes, ma'am. I think, what I would say to the board, and I know it's a constant concern for all boards and commissions, is the fact that they call it sweep. Somebody might come in and sweep the funds, and we all, if you were here, it happened before we were here, but we certainly have heard about it, that I think it was 2007 or 2008, there was a sweep. I think what I would say to the board is, rather than looking at what do we do with the money that we have already, look at where your fees are. And, is this an opportunity for you to reevaluate your fees? If you're putting, in this case, you guys put over 2 years, you're putting about $275,000 into your reserve. factor that in and determine, should you maybe look at and you guys actually, I think, just did have a fee reduction,
Well,
didn't you?
reduced license fees.
Yes, ma'am. So, I think that's the responsible thing to do. You don't have to stop there. You certainly can, conservatively continue to evaluate that and decide. I don't think it won't serve anybody if you continue to put several $100,000 into an account every year that you really can't access. Now, there are other programs where grants are made to further the profession. That might be something you talk to your association about. There are lots of other options of things that you can do with the money, but it is a great opportunity for you all to look at your fees and decide, because you're the one, this is your money going in there. It's your future licensees' money that will go in there, and decide maybe should you, again, look at a nominal fee decrease rather than continuing to put money into a reserve account.
When you have getting back to the sweep, when they sweep, is that generally by formula? In other words, 20% of all the funds or 50% of all the funds that are in all the different boards are excess, or is there a formula, or do they just blanketly take it?
Well, I
How
think.
wide's the broom?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I can tell you that this past year there was a sweep of some accounts. There were no sweeps in regulatory boards. There was an actual sweep in the insurance division. So I can't tell you. I can certainly get the answer for you. I don't know. That's done way above my pay grade, but we can certainly find out. And I think, again, it just depends on circumstances, and that's why it's so difficult and hard for us to come in and answer questions about what might happen in the future, because we don't know what sort of economic times we're going to be in. I think, to your credit, you guys have proactively reduced your fees and tried to make sure that you don't continue to pile too much money into these accounts, and you're still doing that. With a board, with the budget that you have, I don't think putting $200,000, $150,000 a year into your reserve is not bad business. I think that's probably a very conservative, safe plan. If you get much tighter than that, if you do have a bad year, you immediately could go into the red, and you can have. There are lots of unforeseen circumstances. So I think you have managed it very conservatively, and I think you should continue to do so. Look at your fees. I wish I could give you an answer that would make you feel better about what might happen going forward. All I can say is try to responsibly continue to put as little as you can into your reserve balance.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you very much, and be safe going back. And I know, they're not building any statues for you for serving on these boards, but it matters what you're doing, and it really does. We are very grateful to this board and the work that it does on behalf of the state of Tennessee. You have a fantastic director in Robert Gribble, and he's even more lucky to have Lisa Mosby. So they do a great job. As you can see, they've continued to hold the line on expenses and continue to have a good finished product, and we're very grateful for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. All right, moving along, we will next do our legal report with our attorney, Ellery Richardson.
The first case, it's 4 cases against one individual. There are 4 because there are 2 complaints, and each one is against his funeral director license and his embalmer license, if that makes sense.
Moment. Give me time to get this.
So the first complaint out of the 2 for this one person, which is actually 4, it's a little confusing, is 2014-027-121 and 2014-027-122. funeral establishment files complaint against respondent, who was the former owner and manager of that establishment. Respondent wrote a pre-need contract in 2008 and accepted money towards payment of the contract, but did not put the funds in the pre-need trust. In October 2014, the contract beneficiary dies and complainant funeral establishment could not find a full contract. Upon contacting respondent provided the full contract, showing that respondent accepted money towards this funeral, and respondent then paid $5,400 towards the funeral, which is the amount he received from the contract purchaser. There was also a life insurance plan that gave complainant $494.45 towards the funeral. At need, the funeral cost was $8,278.95, and complainant was $2,384, or not the complainant, sorry, the complainant was the funeral establishment. The purchaser and the family was $2,384.50 short. Respondent states that he did not fill out the pre-need and send the money off because he was waiting on full payment. He found while reviewing the file that the purchaser did pay in full, but respondent misread the file and didn't think it was ever paid in full. He did save the funds in a savings account, and this is the money that he sent complainant when the contract beneficiary died. Respondent also states that he explained this to complainant when he sold the business. And the second complaint against this funeral director and embalmer, respondent was also the owner and manager of a cemetery. A routine audit of the cemetery revealed that respondent did not keep any records for lot sales or burial records, did not employ written contracts for burial sales, has not had a trustee since 2009, has not filed any annual report since 2008, and the cemetery has not been registered since 2011. Additionally, respondent transferred plots to different areas of the cemetery without owner's knowledge or consent and without proper documentation. Respondent states that he purchased the cemetery from an individual who did not keep accurate records, and respondent did not realize all the requirements for running a cemetery until years later. Respondent gives the Department of Burial list and copies of plot sales and states that it now has a contract. Respondent also states that he deposited $1,200 into the cemetery's account based on the state's audit. Respondent states that he attempted to register the cemetery but could not meet all of the requirements, such as the required bonds, due to their cost. Respondent states that the cemetery could not afford to pay trustee fees. Respondent denies transferring plots without owner's knowledge. He states that that particular confusion arose when a couple who had plots together divorced. One of the spouses sold the plots back to the cemetery, and the cemetery did not know there had been a divorce. And then the other spouse came in thinking that she still owned the plots. This cemetery ownership has been subsequently changed, although respondent still works for the cemetery. And so the violation of the first complaint, going back to the pre-need contract, would be TCA 625317 for violating a pre-need law, and then the violation for the cemetery would just be unprofessional conduct. And this individual is currently suspended for a year for pre-need violations covering the same time period, which is why my recommendation for the first complaint against the pre-need would be to consolidate it into the previous suspension. Since the way the consent order is worded, it would include contracts written during this time period. This is just one additional one that has come up. So my recommendation would be that that would be included in that suspension. The board accepts that. And I wasn't really sure what to do with the cemetery unprofessional conduct, so I wrote in my recommendation just discuss, so I wasn't sure how the board wishes to proceed in a situation like this. He is currently suspended. I think his suspension will end in about a month or two.
What time period was he suspended? Was his funeral directors and everybody?
Yes, it's been suspended for the past, it was suspended for a year, and that year is almost up in a month or two.
He's still actively working at a funeral home and a cemetery at this time.
He is currently managing the cemetery. He is not
How
working
can
at a
he do
funeral
that?
home.
Oh, he's managing the cemetery?
Yes, he is not currently working at a funeral home because he is suspended.
When did he purchase the cemetery from the individual?
2009.
Okay, so he hasn't been compliant since 2009.
Right. He did sell the cemetery this past year, but he is still managing it.
Has the new owners got in compliant?
The new owners are a church, and they are exempt from our regulations.
What action are we allowed to take if this man is currently in suspension? Or can we attach that suspension and then go further with it?
And we would still be allowed to take disciplinary action because once the suspension is over, as long as he's, kept up with everything, he would still be renewed and active once that is over.
Current suspension now, as it stands from previous cases.
Sorry, I don't quite
I
understand.
mean, you said he's already under suspension for
Yes, for
a previous
the,
case.
The previous cases was when he sold his funeral home, as the law requires for pre-need sellers, an independent CPA audit took place, and they found multiple pre-need contracts that had not actually been sent to the insurance company, and that's what the 1-year suspension was for. And then this is just another contract along those lines that is resurfaced.
Suspension expire.
It should expire in the next month or so. I didn't check the exact date before I came down here, but I can find that out.
I'll throw this out so we can have more discussion. I move this individual's license be revoked.
But he has a funeral director and embalmer's license, so.
Both licensed. Do I need to read the numbers or?
No, you don't need to read the numbers.
Both funeral director and embalmer's license be revoked, permanently revoked.
I have a motion for Ms. Sal and a second for Mr. Patterson.
I'm sorry, can I ask just
Sure.
one question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Okay, so, and I've just been trying to wrap my mind around all of that. So the complaint regarding the trust fund, right? So the first
Pre-need complaint,
the
yes.
pre-need complaint, yes. You said that actually occurred
The contract
during the
was-
period that he's already suspended, correct? His license is already
Right.
suspended.
He wrote the contract back in 2008, so it was while his license was still current. Obviously we didn't realize this had happened until October when the contract beneficiary died.
If we had known that at that time, it would have just been rolled into his current suspension.
That was my understanding. I was not the attorney when that was authorized, but based on that consent order, it seemed that one extra contract would not have changed it. But again, it's just my understanding of what was written. I mean, obviously the board could have been thinking something else.
So most likely that would have been rolled into his current suspension.
And the way the consent order is worded that he signed, I believe it would be legally included in that as well.
So I guess my question is, if we permanently revoked his license, would we be doing that as a result of his actions in the cemetery? Or you know what I'm saying? Are those unrelated issues? His management of a cemetery, is that unrelated to his embalmer and funeral director experience? I mean, I feel like those are we revoking one license because he broke cemetery regulations?
That's good
His
discussion.
embalmer's license is because of the unprofessional conduct and his track record of unprofessional conduct, in my opinion.
Right.
That's what my motion is based on.
Okay.
The funeral board laws and rules are very broad as to what unprofessional conduct means. It could be anything outside of the profession. And this is not directly, but it is extremely related to the profession.
Let me get back. His suspension is to his pre-need selling license, is that correct?
His pre-need seller's license, he actually voluntarily surrendered after this, but his funeral director's and embalmer's license was suspended.
It was already suspended.
Or no, it became suspended from the audit, the previous complaint.
Which burial services probably took care of that, right?
Burial services took care of the pre-need. The board took care of the funeral director's and embalmer's suspension.
I see the point that Mark is making concerning cemetery issues versus funeral home issues. You don't need to be licensed to operate a cemetery. So I see his concern and what his questions are.
I kind of
That's why
unfortunately didn't
you
give you a lot of
offered that.
guidelines
That's
because
right.
I'm not sure how the board wants to take that.
But
And there's he sold his cemetery to the church or gave it to the church, and
One thing about it, the audit, when he sold the business, did not show this additional money that he had not put.
Right,
Where
this
he was
contract
supposed
came
to.
up later.
So
The audit actually
to me,
did not.
that would be almost a separate cause issue instead of combining it with the former, because everything was done based on the audit. It did not show up in the audit until this last October when it surfaced, which was after he had
Right.
sold the business. So, to me, that's almost a separate, we did an audit.
And the-
We thought the audit was complete.
Mhm.
He had money over here that wasn't reported to the audit. That he had in a supposedly account.
Right.
So, even though it happened during the suspension, to me, it's almost two separate, because when you sold out, you audited. Okay, here's the audit, here's what you need to do. But this was over here and not included in the audit. So to me, it would be a separate incident.
Had he had any previous violations up until the pre-need trust?
I believe so. Mr. Gribble he'd had some cemetery violations, but
establishment, funeral establishment, I think the board had taken disciplinary action against the establishment, but him individually, no, I think that was the first. Taken against his funeral director and embalmer license.
Getting back to the moral character, every funeral director and embalmer knows what the rules are for a cemetery. And just to choose not to do something because it's too expensive or I can't afford a bond, that shouldn't be a reason,
there are actually exemptions, at least for one of the bonds, if you can prove certain things as well, which was written in to solve, some financial issues.
The reason I ask about any previous violations, the permanent revocation of the license, I didn't know if that, without previous violations, is that a normal action that we would typically take after this sort of violation? Would you permanently revoke someone's license? Just,
Got to start somewhere,
yeah,
and he has a track record.
yeah.
I had a motion and a second before the call of the question, so what will we?
Can I ask for an amendment to the motion to include an authorization for a hearing as well?
Yes.
And my understanding is that it would include all four of the cases, or both of the cases?
Is that okay with you, Ms. Sal?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Cox?
Okay, so that gives him the opportunity to come and plead his case. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
if he wishes, there will be a formal hearing before the board.
With those amendments, we have a motion for Ms. Sal, a second for Mr. Patterson. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, the next case is case number 2014-029-871 against funeral director, and 2014-029-872 against an establishment. And the respondent funeral director is the managing funeral director of the establishment, respondent number 2. On Thursday, November 20th of 2014, a reporter contacted the department with a photograph, which is actually not attached. If you need it, we can get that to you. Of the respondent funeral director loading a deceased individual into the bed of a covered pickup truck for removal from the hospital. There's been a statement that the truck is fitted for removals in case the removal van is in need of repair. Respondent admits that his pickup truck was used to transport the remains and states that it was an error of judgment. The establishment has 2 vehicles normally used for transport, but they were both out of service. He states that he was not the person making the removal, but that person was acting under his authority. He apologizes to the family for any disrespect they felt, which was unintended. And the funeral laws and rules do not specify what type of vehicle should be used for the transportation of deceased human remains. So it is up to the board whether the standard of care for this practice was violated within the funeral profession. And it would just be unprofessional conduct, because some people took offense to the pickup truck removal. Disrespectful.
Well, being that there is no particular law regarding to what you can remove body in, I don't. And there is no history of a prior.
Move to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion for Mr. Helms.
Sorry, I'm going to clarify. My recommendation isn't clear. Is it the letter of warning for both? Okay.
Earn letter of warning. You can always call another funeral home or someone to borrow.
Have a motion for Ms. Taylor, and who was the second?
I made the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a motion for Mr. Helms, a second by Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, next case is case number 2014-028-541. Respondent has not had a fixed place of business since a fire on December 24th, 2013. Respondent conducted 59 funerals in 2014. Respondent did not have available for inspection the following: establishment license, any funeral director license, any embalmer license, any price list, including casket price list, outer burial price list, general price list, or a statement of funeral goods and services, crematory license, and crematory inspection report. Respondent states that he has been working diligently to erect a building. He states that he had a temporary trailer, but it was vandalized and had to be taken down. So my recommendation would be a suspension of the license and denial of renewal of that license until the statutory requirements of TCA 625, 311, and all the rules are met.
Move adoption of the recommendation of council.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Sow, a second from Mr. Neal. All
Clarify that suspension time period.
Until all the statutory requirements for a fixed place of business are back in order.
Reapply. I think the qualification to reapply for his license should be in there. All this laundry list, I don't think it should just be automatic. Can we do that?
Gribble for that one.
If it's a suspension, then when he meets the requirements, then his license would be reinstated. If it's a revocation, then the person must reapply.
Could it be included? He would have to appear before the board, and we would consider everything about the establishment before we reissue the license. Is that asking too much?
Question is, once he gets all the statutory requirements together, that if he could appear before the board for it to be, I think that should be.
A field representative is going to have to go out A field representative from he's going to go out to make sure the
to
establishment
confirm
is.
that it's all
That's
been-
correct.
Yes.
Okay.
The only problem you have in that is if it's timing of the board meeting and whether or not, if this establishment met the requirements, how long could they not operate?
Yes, but, I mean, they can,
Basically, with the attorney's recommendation, he can't reopen until he has met all the requirements through the inspector, so I can see what Mr. Gribble is stating there.
oh, and I also want to include in my recommendation, I again left it off, I apologize, an authorization for a hearing as well.
Move to adopt the recommendation as amended.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Sow, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The next case is case number 2014-029-351 against the funeral director and 2014-029-352 against an establishment. Complainant's brother was killed in a motorcycle accident in Tennessee. Complainant states that the deceased was religiously devout and respondent separated his cremains into multiple vessels against the family's wishes and against their religion because they view the body as a temple that should not be disturbed. Respondent states that she asked the next of kin more than once whether she wanted cremation because respondent was aware of the family's religion. The next of kin wanted cremation and brought in multiple urns and keepsakes for the cremains. After the memorial service, the next of kin told respondent that the rest of the family was upset with the separation of the cremains. Respondent then returned all the cremains to one urn. So my recommendation would be to close.
Move to accept.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2014-031101. Respondent's manager allowed his funeral director's license to lapse for 11 days. Respondent did not conduct any services during this time. Respondent states that it mailed the renewal before the lapse, but processing took a few days. Respondent also changed ownership about a month later. So my recommendation would be to close with a letter of warning.
So it's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2014-031121. Respondent's establishment license expired on June 30th, 2014, and was not reinstated until August 13th, 2014, which is about a month and a half. During this time, respondent handled arrangements for one case. Respondent states that she forgot to fill out the back of the renewal form and did not realize the license lapsed. Respondent apologizes for the oversight. My recommendation would be a consent order with civil penalty of $150 and authorization for a hearing.
Move to accept the recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Sow, a second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Right. Next is case number 2014-031221 against the funeral director and 2014-031222 against an establishment. Respondent funeral director's license expired on February 28th and was not reinstated until April 28th. Respondent funeral director serves as the manager of respondent establishment. Respondent handled 23 cases during this time. Respondents did not respond to the complaint. So my recommendation would be for the funeral director, a consent order with a $750 civil penalty and authorization for a hearing, and for the establishment, a consent order with a civil penalty of $1,400 and authorization for a hearing.
Does this 750 include the 250 for?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
But
Non-response.
for non-response.
Yes, okay.
Move to accept.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Mr. Patterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
President, also on that, I would ask that the board require the respondent, if they sign a consent order, to pay by certified funds, because we've had a problem with this respondent before in getting checks for insufficient funds. I didn't want to say anything about that till the board made their decision, but if that could,
Just please amend my motion to include that.
I think the board will need to vote on that again, I think, wouldn't it? Just to be
Okay.
done again.
I'll make a motion with the amendment to include a certified check and accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion for Mr. Helms, a second for Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Case is case number 2014-031-481 against the funeral director's license, 2014-031-482 against the embalmer's license, and 2014-031-483 against the establishment. Respondent funeral director and embalmer licenses expired on June 30th and were not renewed at the time of inspection. During this time, respondent acted as an embalmer for one case and funeral director for two, and he's also the manager of respondent establishment. Respondent states that he did not receive renewal notices and apologizes for the oversight. So my recommendation for the funeral director and embalmer would be a consent order with civil penalty of $250 and authorization for a hearing, and for the establishment, a consent order with civil penalty of $250 and authorization for a hearing.
Said that the license expired on June the 30th and renewed at time of.
It was not renewed at the time of inspection, which was I'd have to double check that.
It was,
Um,
seemed like it was a few weeks when the inspector went out and did the inspection of the funeral
It
home, was
hadn't-
when it was.
It hadn't been terribly long, but if you want me to pull that information, I can do that. It just would take a few minutes.
You think it was a few weeks?
When I can recall, it wasn't a very long time. It was, I think, within a month, but I can double check.
I'm thinking 3 weeks is what I'm thinking,
Okay.
but I could be wrong. I think it was about 3 weeks later when the.
He renewed his license within the month, say, so it was pretty quick.
He did renew it after the inspection.
Okay.
I think it was a couple days after.
Move to adopt the recommendation of council.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Sow and a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The last case is case number 2014-031-311. Routine examination revealed that respondent did not have the inspection report for the crematory it uses available for inspection. One cremation authorization had the funeral director's name printed but not his signature, and respondent did not have its outer burial container price list available for inspection. Respondent states that he was able to find all the documentation after the inspection. And this is his second complaint for similar violations, and so my recommendation would be a consent order with a civil penalty of $1,000 and authorization for a hearing.
How long has this other been open?
The other one has been closed. It was opened in 2013. Yeah, as you can see, he paid the $750 civil penalty. Penalty if he's done the same violation twice, which is
Of council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Sow and a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
that concludes the legal report.
All right. I believe that completes our agenda with, or is there anything else to come before the board? With that, I'll accept a motion for,
So moved.
Second.
have a motion from Ms. Taylor and one from Mr. Patterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Hey, Bob.